So welcome everyone to another session of continuing education series of VII Community in partnership with PhotoWings. When we talked last year what our community is interested in, a lot of you said how is it working with agencies and how is it creating stronger partnerships. So here we have today Ron Haviv that you all know really well and Marcel Saba from Redux Photos. Redux and VII Agency had a long partnership, and I think Ron will highlight a little bit that partnership, and then Marcel will also talk about Redux Photos history, and then I would really encourage all of you, because we have both of them here, to write in the Q&A to ask questions. We would prefer that you ask questions, but we will probably ask them at the end and dedicate the last 15 to 20 minutes of this session to your questions. So Ron, I think you'll start with this conversation. I'll just pass the conversation to you. And Marcel, once again, welcome and really thank you for responding to our request.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. It's a real pleasure once again to be able to speak with you, Marcel, and thank you, Nika, and VII Community and partnership with PhotoWings for giving us the opportunity to talk about something that for many of you is still very important and often very still mysterious. And I think it's important to kind of have a little bit of an understanding about the history of photo agencies, and then, of course, bringing into what photo agencies are able to do today and what they're looking for. And so with that, Marcel, I'll hand it over to you, given that you predate me by just a bit. And kind of your history is so inspirational as an agent. And I have to say that I've been working with Marcel on and off since the beginning of my career. And I think that Marcel is without question the best agent in the business and the most trustworthy and most caring, and has done a great deal for my career as well as many others. And it's always an honor for me to be able to speak with him and be represented by him. And with that being said, Marcel, if you can kind of talk a little bit about how you arrived where you are today, and then talking a little bit about what you guys are looking for today as well at Redux.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for the very warm welcome. I really appreciate it. And yes, we go back a long way, and it's been a great working experience knowing you as a person and friend. I really enjoy working with you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. And just give you a quick background. I started working in an agency world back in 1979. You guys, some of you can do the math. That's a long time that I've been in this business. I worked for a French company called Gamma that had an office, a partner here called Liaison. So I worked for Liaison in the US and started really from just learning how to stand picture, write captions, understand the photography business, understand how events are covered, how portraits are being shot back then, what the magazine market is, filing pictures, pulling picture out for research. A lot of people don't realize a lot of the agency have a library of images that magazine need photograph to illustrate articles they're writing about. And you've got, as a photo agency, the agency is producing photographs globally, locally, nationally, and putting the stuff in the archive. And somebody has to write the captions, look at the images from the archive. Back then, we were looking at slides and black and white prints and negative, and selecting images that you, in turn, as a researcher, will send them out to the magazine, and the magazine hopefully like the images you're sending and end up using them. And then we call that licensing an image, and we end up billing the images to the magazine and returning half the commission to the photographer from the images sold. Started there working, as I mentioned, learning the business of photography, learning what a photographer does, learning how a photographer does things, and learning how to file the images that they do and the meaning they have, and understanding the connection of between the marketplace and the photographer in creating this set of images that have, needs for the future that can be used for years to come. And then from there learned that the magazine market are in need of photographers. So figure out how to work with a photographer, look at their work, understanding what they're doing, and then therefore trying to, push that work to the magazine, introduce that photographer to the magazine. Back then, you have to remember there was no internet, there was no emails, there was no, basically there was, we're working on the phone, calling people up on the phone physically, telling them, hey, Ron Haviv, is going to San Francisco, is going to Iran, is going to Israel, or just connecting them, and then talk about the photographer. You can even show them the work at first. You have to really talk to them about the work, and they have to sort of build some sort of trust. And then eventually, if the photographer's in town, you make the connection with the magazine, send a photographer to meet with the person. Anyhow, that's how, as an agent, I started understanding the business. And from Gamma, I went to work for a smaller agency up in Providence called Picture Group. And the reason why I left the bigger agency, I wanted to understand more how this person up in Providence named Don Aboud was creating this agency based not out of New York, but he was finding photographer across the state. There are really good in lighting, they're really good in doing stories. He's finding all sort of different talents. So he had a knack of reaching out to these photographers and connecting them with the magazines. So I was very much interested in that. And so I went up to work with him, and I brought with me my sort of international connection with the world, because through Gamma, we were connected through a lot of agents and photographer overseas. So I thought it was a good combination between that and him domestically. So we became a little powerhouse among bigger agency up in Providence, where we sort of, between his domestic connection, between my international connection, we sort of were bringing in, talent, a group of talent to the magazine's editorial market domestically and overseas. And the business started growing and growing and growing, and figure out how the need to find photographer was so crucial. And again, I have to really emphasize that there was no internet. Magazines editors could not find photographer by hitting search button on their computer. They had to come to people like us. They had to rely on people like us and our reputation to give them, or refer them to the right photographer. But from there, after a while, I realized, I've been doing this between Gamma and Picture Group for the last 11 years. I decided to start my own agency. I moved back to New York. I had the experience now domestically overseas, and I figured, I want to do this on my own. I was young, and eager. It was my early 30, basically just turned 30, and I started Saba Press Photos. And this is how I met Ron. Back in 89, late 89, actually. We just barely met. There was a San Francisco earthquake, and somebody was sending me, an editor sending me, hey, there's this young photographer who was just in Panama. You should take a look at their work. But I was starting new. Ron came to me. We met. We just connected, but I wasn't ready really to make the jump yet to take him on. I was trying to figure out, could I really help him? Could I get him work? All these things you have to calculate as an agent, so you don't put somebody's hopes up. Anyway, we end up luckily connecting with a trip back to Panama, with an earthquake in San Francisco. And, I started picking up talents, and back, maybe call it timing wise, Eastern Europe would start falling apart, and Ron and other photographers start, eagerly covering, the fall of whatever, communism, if you want to call it, back then. And we start getting recognized. I had an agency with my last name, the Saba credits start getting seen, photographers start reaching out, finding out who is this guy, who is this person. And so I start connecting with photographer. And again, the relationship and knowing the marketplace domestically and overseas, reaching out to editor here and overseas really helped me get photographers work and connect them, with their editors, and get the magazines to hire these photographers. in short, was a great run, a 10-year run at Saba, and then the digital world start happening, internet start creeping up on us. Everything was digital. I had like almost 500,000 of images non-digitized. It was overwhelming. I got scared, and then Getty and Corbis, the big giants back then, Corbis was owned by Bill Gates, start swallowing up agencies and buying agencies, and I figured, hey, I'm not going to be able to afford digitizing $500,000, so I made the decision to sell Saba Press Photos to Corbis, and I end up working for them, and I end up digitizing the archive, but I end up realizing this is not the place for me to work for a big company. I saw, again, I'm running this through a speed. I end up starting Redux, left Corbis, got away from the corporate world of the bigger agency, and I started, again, in the same rhythm, an agency called Redux back in 2000. And, in the same principle, working with a group of talent, building an archive eventually. I started from nothing again, but building a digital archive automatically from the beginning, reaching out to photographer, connecting editors to photographers, have the archives through our part, working with partners was really crucial for us as an agency to work with different partners. When I mean partners are people that base overseas, that have production, that have their own photographers, we don't own any photographer. Everything is freelance. And I hope you guys will have question about that. Everything is copyright to the photographer. What we call in our business is a right managed agency, which we're managing the rights to the photographer. We don't take the rights from the photographer. We're basically licensing the images for the photographer. We're basically getting them assignment. They always keep the copyright. Anyway, so Redux, it's growing, it's still growing, it's still functioning. It grew from 7-8 photographer to represent a roster of 60 photographer on assignment. And then the archive, from 20 years now, it started growing and growing. And, from photographer we don't represent that decided they don't want to be with bigger agency. They want to find a home that's sort of, in sort of sync with what they produce. So we work with thousands of photographers outside the Redux roster that sort of give us their archives or images or stories to pitch, to license, to resell, and get it published in the editorial world that exists today. And the world that, the world that exists today, moving really fast forward, is very different than the world existed back then in so many ways. There is social media, there's internet, people find photographers at their fingertips. So we're competing with all what's out there, but we still feel we have a good place, that a home for a lot of photographer. We have a great image of library that we syndicate through us and through our partners. We represent as VII, where VII was an entity as by itself, and now we represent the VII photographer directly. We represent lots of agencies like Panos, VII. We represent the work from the New York Times. We represent the archive. Is not just about Redux photographer, which I mentioned. We have million images that go through our system, that's connected through our partners, which mean a photographer can benefit not just from us selling the work here domestically or licensing the work here domestically, but they can benefit from us licensing the work through our partners in different places around the country. I'm sure I left a lot of things out, but I just want to give you really quick roundup, just to give you an idea of where we are, how we are. There's a lot of moving part being in an agency. You're representing photography, what it does it take, marketing the work, editing the portfolio. Even there's a lot of moving part in terms of the licensing the image. When the image comes to our archive, how we move it, where we put it, how does it go out, what kind of caption, keyword. But those are I would love for you guys to think about what you want to ask. via the chat room or directly, Ron and me, and we'll just take it from there.
That's great, Marcel. Thank you. That was always inspiring and informative, and also for me to see how like my own career is intertwined at different points with yours over the years, and to kind of talk a little bit about my background and why I became what's known as an agency photographer, magazine photographer, and so on. Kind of brings me back to just to my beginning as a photographer, my kind of first working the streets of New York as a freelance photographer, learning about the business, kind of straight out of school. I entered this amazing world of men and women trying to tell stories, trying to have impact in various different ways, from working from the wires like AP and AFP, and as well as local newspapers in New York, like the New York Post, Daily News, and the Times. And I found this world where people are incredibly supportive of the new generation, trying to help people, the younger people, learn how to become photographers, how to make sure there's somebody there to follow their work. And that's also one of the inspirations for Gary Knight and myself creating the VII Foundation and creating the VII Academy, and of course VII Community. We're trying to kind of pay it forward, pay back, and so on. And so people were very helpful to me as I walked the streets of New York. And eventually I was introduced to various people at Agence France Presse, which was just starting to work in the United States. And I started working there for free as an intern, and eventually started freelancing there on assignment by assignment basis in New York. And to make a long story short, I wound up going to cover a story in Central America, in Panama, where there was an election being held by a dictator. And I was able to manage to get my accreditation through AFP, and was sort of doing uh, daily work in the run up to the election where there's violence and so on. Manusha Degati was the bureau chief, and he was quite helpful teaching me um, a lot at the time. And I was also lucky enough to be working with a photographer named Christopher Morris, who actually gave me a plane ticket to go to Panama. And I wound up taking a photograph in Panama that became very well known, wound up on the covers of Newsweek, the Times, Time Magazine, U.S. News, Perry Match, other places, and so on. It was kind of a big splash for me. As a photographer, nobody had ever heard of me, and so on. Now all of a sudden, people were starting to pay attention to me, who I was, what I was doing, and so on. And I went to a few other places after that, and then decided like I needed to decide what was the next step in my career, and what were the pros, what were the cons to becoming a staff member. I was offered a job at AFP to become staff, but I also had the opportunity to be freelance. I went, like Marcel said, I went and I saw Marcel as he was John Giordano, a photographer who was working with Marcel, introduced me. And I went to Marcel with my basically one story that I had photographed, which was Panama. And Marcel, being very generous, took the time to look at me and basically look at my work and look at me. And we met. And Marcel said, "No, I'm not interested in working with you right now." And I, of course, was crushed and disappointed. Um, but I persevered, as many of you should always never take no for a final answer. And luckily, shortly after, I think I met Marcel in the summer, and then by early fall, there was a coup attempt in Panama. And I called Marcel and said, "I'm going, whether you send me or not, I'm going, and I can either work for AFP, or I'm going to give you an opportunity um, to see if we can work together." And Marcel said, I think you might have said, "Marcel, give me an hour," or something like that. An hour later, you had not gotten me an assignment, but you had got me money from a Canadian magazine called Maclean's, which was enough money to get on the plane and go. And that was essentially the beginning of my relationship with Marcel. But before that, when I was deciding staff, agency, what are the pros and cons, at that time there were a lot of kind of very obvious kind of pros and cons. One being what Marcel already referenced, this idea about copyright ownership. I was very reluctant to um, become a staff member where one would have a boss, which I had never had before. I never had a real job, so I didn't really understand what that meant, but I knew I didn't want somebody telling me what to do. and I wanted the ownership of the work that I was producing. And at that time, with archive, owning your copyright would also have a real financial benefit because your archive would sell for a good amount of money. The more stories you did, your photographs were working for you all the time. So there was a financial benefit of being with an agency, but it was a risk because you never knew how much money you were going to make each month. You never knew what kind of assignments you were going to get. And at that time, Marcel was very generous. And Marcel, like if there was a story where there would be no support, Marcel would pay 50% of the expenses and I would pay 50. And once the expenses were paid off, we would share the profits, which is not a normal way of working today for most agencies. But at the time, it was something that was very inviting and allowed me to be able to afford as a young photographer that I didn't have to be a bartender or work at Starbucks or something to make enough money to be able to travel. And this ability to be able to either decide on my own, this is a story I want to do, and tell Marcel, and then he would try to get support, or Marcel would see the news coming and say, okay, this is what the magazines are going to be interested in the next few weeks. What kind of story ideas do you have? Or I'm just going to call and speak to the editors and try to get you work. Um, and that's something that I found incredibly valuable because some people are very good photographers. Some photographers are very good about speaking about money at the same time about speaking about photography. I don't feel as comfortable as doing that. And I like having a line where there's somebody that is able to negotiate, deal with the ins and outs of money while I spend my time with the editor talking about the story. And sometimes I feel that can be very beneficial to do that. Obviously, if you choose to do that as a photographer, you're paying for that service, paying Redux, paying Saba for that. But I think it's worth it. And I think it's worth it also because especially with somebody like Marcel, he knows the market so much better than I do. He can negotiate a better deal. And at times, especially with some of the other agencies during the history of agencies with the Sigma and the SIPA and other places that used to exist that are no longer really around now, those agents could negotiate for their photographers on saying, okay, send this photographer to Cuba and this photograph, these paparazzi photographs that we have of X celebrity of the month, we're going to also give you a great deal on it. So they were able to kind of leverage different things because they were producing so much different kind of work. So that was another kind of benefit of being with an agency. And as my career grew, and I think that I helped Saba grow in reputation, and of course, without question, Marcel and the agency itself, the infrastructure, the team that was around, which of course is also very beneficial as a freelance photographer to have multiple people representing you, giving you ideas, editing your work when needed, and so on. We're able to also grow together, which I think is also was a great experience. But as Marcel referenced, after about 10 years, the industry started to change. And one of the things that kind of one of the sort of more negative aspects of being with an agency, and this is really not so much in terms of the actual agency, but in the way that you as a photographer play your role, is that if you rely completely on the agency to do everything, you don't have as much control over the business aspects of your career. And that could wind up becoming a negative. If you are somebody that can be aggressive and work with your agent and also let them do what they need to do and let you do what you need to do, you can have more control. But I felt as time went on, as well as three other photographers that were represented by Marcel, that by the time Marcel had decided that the digital expansion and representation was not going to be a profitable one to continue in, and sold Saba to Corbis, it was kind of it was kind of like the final push for myself, Gary Knight, John Stammeyer, and Antonin Kratachville, who were all at Saba, plus Noctway, Alexandre Boulard, and Chris Morris, who's at Black Star, that maybe we should try to do something that Magnum had done 50 years earlier as photographers and basically start on our own, create an agency, which was called Seven because there were seven of us that started. And we had all had relationships at that time, strong relationships and contracts with Time or Newsweek or Geographic and so on. So we could afford to kind of take a risk, but be more responsible for everything. So taking over what Marcel was doing, but doing it ourselves. And that has worked out reasonably well. VII existed as an agency until just recently when it was acquired by the VII Foundation, which is kind of another aspect of the things that you can do. But one of the things that we all learned very quickly, and I shared this with Marcel probably every time that we met, was like, wow, this running an agency thing is really difficult. And there's a lot more to do than we ever thought. So we were a bit naive in our kind of belief on this idea about taking control of our own business, which definitely had benefits, but also had a lot of different aspects to it that I personally would prefer that somebody else dealt with, and I would pay somebody to do that. So these are things that everybody has to kind of decide as you kind of move forward, is like what works for you. And I think for me, it's always like what is going to allow me to basically do what I care about most, which is creating images that have impact. And that's a lot of work right there for every person to do. And so you want to have people that you can work with behind you, people that believe in you, people that will, one, most importantly, understand that this is a business that we're all in. And when I teach this in my survival workshop, and I think that we teach this at the VII Academy classes and at Foundry and so on. And I know Marcel talks about it when he gives his lecture at Foundry and so on, that all of us have to remember that even though in the world of photojournalism, often taking us to difficult places, places of crisis, people suffering, and so on, that there's a little bit of a hesitation to put a financial number on going and documenting something like that and so on, because it's some people feel like it's exploitation and so on. In the end, though, if you feel like you're trying to do something that will have impact, you need to be able to survive as a photographer. And as you grow older, I know there's some young people on this call and there's some older people on this call in terms of career. You know that other responsibilities of life will eventually come to you. You'll get a partner. You might want to buy a house. You might want to do support your parents as they grow older. All sorts of things that come about as you get older. So it's very easy to some extent to make a living doing this work in your 20s on your own or sharing an apartment in New York with 6 other photographers and so on. But at some point, life changes and you need to be able to support yourself so you can not say get rich and live in a mansion, but be able to support yourself, have a life that you want, and most importantly, have the free ability to go off and do this work and not have to worry about trying to get another job or trying to do multiple things and so on. Even though I think at this point, um, you cannot, it's very hard to survive. And I'd be surprised if there are any photographers surviving today just on editorial photography as a freelancer. I think you have to add things like advertising and working with NGOs and your archive sales, and then possibly print sales, books and other things to be able to really fully have multiple streams coming to you. But the agency will be kind of that kind of core aspect, because those are the people that kind of represent you. Those are the people that you are, in some ways, to for lack of a better phrase, you're married to them. So when somebody asks me, oh, I'm looking for an agency, who should I go see? And I say, go see Redux, go see Contact, maybe VU, maybe Panos, maybe Zuma, other people. They're not a lot around, but there are a number of them around, or even a Getty. You have to see, like, I'm going to be with these people for a while, and they're going to represent me, and they're going to represent my name. So you want your name to be represented by someone or something that you respect, that you can feel proud to be connected, that you can trust. These are really important things to be able to decide when you're deciding if you're going to go with an agency. And so it will take, and shouldn't be just done over email. It shouldn't be like, hey, would you represent me? And a contract comes back and that's it. I would really strongly advise not to do that. You want to talk to the people that are going to be talking about you, talking about your work, preferably if you can, to speak with Marcel or somebody in a comparable position at another agency, understand who the other people are, because not everything's a great fit. Some agencies will be, at least hopefully one will be a perfect fit, and this makes the most sense, and I feel totally comfortable here. I know also, again, this idea about the business part, there are very many unfortunate stories, and we can probably sit here for the rest of the time talking about it, of photographers being ripped off by their agency, right? So the money goes to the agency first. You have to be able to trust the agency. You want to work with somebody like Marcel, where you know never in whether at Picture Group, Saba, Redux, has any photographer ever said about Marcel or anybody he's working with, oh, you stole the money, or that's not what I was expecting, or so on. And you would think that would be kind of like a normal thing, but in reality, it's not across the board. So you want to do research, you want to talk to people, you want to make sure that you're working with a legitimate business that's going to represent you, your name, your work, and also make sure that you get compensation for it. So these are really kind of key things when you're thinking about what to do. So when um, at VII, we saw what we could do as photographers running a business, which is limited unless you really are somebody that I think went to business school or really knows business well. Most photographers are not very good at business. All the photographers that have come through VII, including the founders, we had our limitations and we paid the price. We made mistakes and so on. So these are things that you have to kind of think about. There are definitely ways to work on your own or to create your own little collaborative group and so on, but you have to be smart and you have to really understand what you're doing. And then you also have to work with other people like a Redux, because it's not financially viable to be able to be represented in the entire world, because having staff where you have to hire people to make phone calls, to send your work out, to be part of a network and so on, costs money. And there's not enough money coming back in archive sales unless you're representing lots and lots of people, lots of different agencies like Redux is, including like the New York Times. The money is limited. So you have to, again, be smart about how you're doing things. If any of you are deciding or thinking about doing what we did at VII or what Nor did, and a few other groups, everybody has some benefits and everybody has some limitations. And so these are kind of really it's important. I've learned a lot of lessons for a long time for a good part of the history of VII. I've been either on the board or behind the scenes helping run the agency. So I've seen kind of the way things work. And especially when you have staff and you're responsible for other people's lives, the staff has to go first. You can't pay yourself before you pay your staff. And these things seem very obvious, but when you have rent to pay, but somebody else that's working for you has rent to pay, you have to make the sacrifice. If you haven't made enough money, your employee gets paid first. So these are all kind of like little bits and pieces about the behind the scenes with the agency, but kind of going back to this idea, and I think it's important about how much effort do you put into it. There are certain things that an agency can do for you as a photographer. They can reach people you've never reached before. They can make introductions. They can sell your archive. They can have a system to do it. They can make calls on your behalf. They can make negotiations on your behalf. But now, given the way that editors find photographers primarily via Instagram, other publications, portfolio reviews, and so on, it's not going to matter whether you're with VII, Magnum, or Redux. If you as a photographer are not making enough of an effort to reach out to editors yourself, to go to portfolio reviews, to pitch stories, and so on, editors want more and more to deal with photographers one-on-one. They're happy to then go negotiate with somebody like Marcel, but often they're going to also want the pitch coming from the photographer. What's your thought? How much are you putting into the story? What have you done on the story already? Are you an expert? Why should I hire you over somebody else from another freelancer or another agency photographer? So I think the most successful way to work with an agency is the photographer who's doing the same amount of outreach as the agent is and working together and working as a team. But so often photographers are like, okay, great, I'm represented by Redux, I'm done. I don't have to do anything. My work is on the website. I expect a phone call in an hour. And believe me, it used to happen like that, as Marcel said, because when the agencies were the way to find the photographers, Marcel would be getting all the calls. There'd be days when I would have 3 assignments in a day. There were photographers that would have 5 assignments in a day. They're the first 2 hours for the business week. Then I'm working for Fortune. Then I've got an assignment for Time. Then I'm doing something else for Stern. That doesn't exist as much anymore, if at all. The market has changed, the way the magazines have changed. So working together and working with somebody, let's say using again Redux as an example, that can help you parse and understand the way things are working, also help you with contracts, all these different things works the best. But the photographer, and Marcel, I would assume you would agree with me, the photographers that you have that are just kind of like waiting for Redux to do everything are not going to be, for the most part, very successful, right?
Absolutely. It does not work this way anymore. I mean, it does not. They have to be involved. They have to be, alert, look for things, share things, and, you can't just sit and wait for the email to come or a text or a phone.
So what would you say, Marcel, like in terms of like the time spent from you and Lori and Perry and Alden, who are all on your staff, and Tiffany, what are they spending the most time on? Is it like contracts? Is it marketing? Is it archive
No,
management? Like,
yeah. I mean, like I said, and you sort of mentioned it, Ron, and I mentioned it briefly. There's a lot of moving parts inside the agency that sometimes, outside photographers just don't understand. You they say, "Oh, things are easy. We're giving you a digital file. Um, it's going to go in the archive." Well, no, it's going to go to the FTP where we're going to have to somebody like person, the team behind what runs Redux. Somebody has to download that file. Somebody has to look at the images. Somebody has to look at the caption, make sure the caption are correct. Somebody has to verify, that the keywording is correct, and the exposure are correct. So the images have to be edited, and then after that's all done, then it's get pulled into the archive, uploaded to the archive, so it can be published on the archive, and then somebody like Perry has to make sure it goes to the partners, so they have the images, so they can license them as well. And then after that, a researcher who does, somebody like Lori, who's been in this business for a long time as well, who knows the magazines, who knows the print online publication, and Daniel, the two of them are sort of the back end force of moving now the images to the domestic client here and telling them, hey, we just got a great set from Ron Haviv or on Haiti, or he just came back from Gaza, or in Gaza. Here's the first set, and upload it, send it to the Atlantic. As you know, some of your images got used from Gaza from the Atlantic, even though you were on assignment for somebody else. So somebody's physically sending these images out to be seen. You have to be in this business we're in, which you mentioned to the photographers, is you have to be proactive and reactive. We gotta set in, we have to react, and then be proactive by sending it out and showing it to people that we have new material. So there's a movie. So all these moving parts have to come all together to make it functional, and that's why some photographers have to do the initial work, right? They have to think, take the picture, compose, style the pictures, but then they have to like file the pictures, capture the picture correctly, and then the rest we have to keyword. We don't expect the photographer to keyword everything. So all these moving parts have to all come together for the image to sort of be alive, so to speak, on our archive, or any archive that sort of exists, in my opinion.
With the 60 photographers that you mentioned that Redux represents, are these the photographers that you have a belief in them? I know you believe in everybody that you represent and their work, but obviously it's a lot of people. But the 60 people that you've kind of separated into Redux assignment photographers, these are people that you feel like that you have a hand in kind of steering their career from, especially the younger ones throughout, or is it how do you work on the career kind
Well,
of conversation?
for the most part, the short answer is yes. So those photographers have been with the agency for a long time. Some of them are new. Some out of part of the 60 photographer. Some of them not belong. They don't belong to anybody. But some of them are represented by Life, for example, in Germany, or Contrasto. That sort of are like sub photographer from different partners that we sort of aesthetically like the work. And some of them they're randomly, he or she are based, globally. They're not just in the US. It was just a random number that we have. And back then, the demand for us to take on more photographer was more robust, because we were getting a lot of work. And we were getting a lot of work internationally, and then we liked the photographers that we worked with, so we spent a lot of time talking to them, working on the work we want to put on our site, and we spend a lot of time pushing their work out. And we hopefully, trying to generate a stream of steady magazine assignment, so to speak, some commercial assignment. And now the assignment business is sort of really different, and like you said, it just changed a lot. So we're more and more cautious of which photographer to add on to the roster, because we want to make sure we can provide them the service and the work. And at the end of the day, every photographer is looking for assignment, especially on the roster. And the assignment business we're in, it's just very different than what it used to be. But yes, the easy question, yes, we provided support for them. We even, for some from some photographer, we even got them assistant if they needed one, helped them with flight if they needed one. But mostly really went out and continue to go out and try to hustle and try to keep presenting their work, and keep make them, keep them in the mind of magazine editor, who are totally overwhelmed with how many photographers out there they want to try to give work, and try to, young photographer they want to try to help, or whatever.
I mean, are you
Anyway.
surprised, given kind of the difficulty of the economics of not just photojournalism, but the kind of whole media, that I assume you're continually getting asked about representation, and new photographers keep coming up? Are you surprised still that there's so many of us, that we keep multiplying?
So Ron, it's really something you probably will understand, because you ran an agency in a way, even though it was a membership agency, or I get excited. There's so much. I get excited, and I'm like, so can I do anything about it sometimes? There's so many great talent out there that I really feel like I like to help, and but there's not enough work, or I'm afraid to take somebody on a roster right now, as much as we used to be before. It was like, saw somebody's work, liked it, no problem, let's just give it a try. Now it's like so many calculation has to go into, can we really help them? Are they based in the right place? Are they doing the right thing? Can we wait a year or two for them to get established? So, but on the overall, I'm so excited still that there's still so many great talent out there. And yes, we'll add more photographer to the roster, but obviously it's just not as quickly, and it's not as fast as we like it. And it's the business of assignment is not lucrative, is probably not the right word. It's not as much as what it used to be. And if you look, every day, like yesterday, I was so happy to hear, I don't know, another thing is we teach in these courses that photographer has to follow the industry a little bit. They have to understand marketing. They have to understand what goes on in industry. Yesterday, I read the Sports Illustrated has been bought, and it's going to be print again. I got so excited about it, because you don't see that news kind of very often. All you see, this magazine folded, this online stuff publishing. So it's like, oh, great. So you have to stay up with what's going on in our industry. Unfortunately, it's been sort of always on the downside lately. This is not happening. We're not buying. Time magazine used to be, let's say, 200 plus pages. Now it's 100 and some, right? So all this shrinkage affect our industry. All this affect us from taking on photographer to the roster, to the assignment roster, if that makes any sense.
It does. I want to talk about marketing in a moment, but just to draw back on something you mentioned briefly, which is such a, I think, a key part, at least I've experienced it, I know other colleagues have as well, is this the fear of expenses by the client, meaning that where you're based is actually could be as important as how good a photographer you are. Do you one, do you think that's true? And two, do you think there are ways that photographers, well, one, do you think that they should, if they're deciding where they go in the world, should they look for a place that has very few photographers, but not as much desire for photography, but there's enough there to survive, or go to a place where a lot of people are based, but there's a lot of work? I mean, the place of being where to base is such a key thing for so many people.
Yeah, funny, Ron, I get asked that all the time. So here's my broader answer to that question, right? I think there's a really key element of where you need to be based if you were calculating, economics, obviously, and work that comes through the place you're gonna live in. Like if you're in New York, right? There's a lot of work in New York. There's more work in New York, I'm sorry to say, than Chicago, maybe, right? But there to expand on that, if you're a photographer in New York, you don't want to be one of many. You want to be one of the few photographers in New York that people reach out to. So you have to base on what talent you have, style you have. Are you a portrait shooter? Are you a street photographer? Are you doing documentary in New York? So it's just where, the kind. Are you doing just great lit portrait? And so that's what you have to determine. All these factors have to be determined where you live. Like for example, we don't have any photographer in Chicago if you look at Redux. And there's work in Chicago, since I mentioned Chicago, and we need somebody there. So we should probably have somebody in Chicago, because we turn jobs down once in a while. And why we don't have anybody in Chicago? It's like we just haven't connected with the right person yet. So it has to be the right connection, the right person, and then the right place for us. For example, there's work in Nairobi sometime, right? Nairobi is a good place to be, but you have, what kind of work you do? What kind of work you doing in Nairobi? What kind of work we getting in Nairobi? Well, we're not getting news coverage out of Nairobi. We're getting storytelling from Nairobi. We're getting maybe like an NGO assignment out of Nairobi. Maybe once in a while we get a Fortune assignment out of Nairobi. So there's cities that generate interest, and sadly there's cities that don't generate interest. Like Shanghai is a great place. China is still a good place. Hong Kong is a good place. Tokyo is a good place. So places do matter, but also if you're in a big city like LA or Paris, I think, or even Berlin or Milan or Rome, you really cannot be one of many photographers. New York, especially New York City, you have to define, and in bigger city where there's work, you have to define the style you do. You have to be prominent and visible and have a specific look and feel that magazine, I'm just talking magazine in general here, right? Gravitate to, and will remember you and don't forget you. But you can get away being in New Delhi and be shooting business portrait and do documentary reportage and mix it up, because you're not a mini photographer in Delhi. You could be one of the few photographers that has the ability to photograph different genre work and still be a value photographer. So that's why I'm trying to broaden up the aspect of where you can be. It really doesn't matter but again, I'm contradicting myself, saying where you can be does matter, but only I think in bigger cities where there's so many photographers. You have to rise above the so many, have a specialty, if that makes sense.
And then going to marketing, like what, I mean, there's one conversation about what photographers need to do for themselves, but what does Redux do for Redux and the photographers they represent in terms of marketing, aside from the obvious like website and Instagram feed, which I don't think your Instagram feed is very strong actually in terms of audience, right? Do you know if your audience is mostly made up of editors, which is then obviously very strong, or how does that work?
Yeah, we it's funny. I mean, Instagram, we don't post as much as we used to. We sort of, we only have like, I don't know, 24,000 followers. We don't really, we don't have what Seven used to have. I know now it's not, it's like you guys had like at some point 100,000 followers, and I don't know if they're mostly photographers. We really try to target. For us, the targeting is a client, and maybe we should post more on social media. But I don't think I answered your question anyway. So I think
What I mean, what's
I
the strategy? I mean, what do you guys do?
so our strategy. Let's say somebody. There's a bunch of questions which I'm not able to read right now, but at some point maybe we'll read them.
We'll
Let's
get to
say
them in a
you're a
minute.
new photographer. Yeah, let's say you're a new photographer coming to us, and we like you, and you're on the roster. So we'll spend time. We'll make an edit of what we think is cohesive, that we like. Obviously, it's an abbreviated edit that we're gonna put on our roster because we can't put 200 images or 300 images. And then once we do that, then we have a marketing strategy. We create a banner. I mean, anybody watching this, listening to this, should do the same thing, even if they don't have an agent. We create a banner, we have a list of clients, and we'll send that banner with a note from me or from the rep. Say, hey, we just took on this new photographer, and this is a quick link to their work. With the banner pops up once they open up the email. We try to put a cohesive banner that's attractive enough, that's short and sweet, that hopefully that editor will sort of, open up that email, look at the banner, like the images, and say, this is really interesting. I wonder who Redux just took on. And we'll click on the link, that has a link to the Redux website for the photographer, and then has a link to the photographer directly. And then hopefully the conversation will start. We'll follow up. Hey, did you like this photographer we took on? Did you get a chance to look at the work? And now, and hopefully the world we live in, hopefully people listening to this, you just can't give up from one email, and what we try to do, we try not to send a mass email. We don't put a new photographer on social media. We're trying to be direct, sending a message directly from me or from the rep to the editor so they can open it up. Because you have to understand, which I'm sure you do, that these editors get so many emails a day, and they're busy, they're probably overworked. Sometimes we blame them. I even blame them. Oh, they haven't got back to me. So I try not to take anything personally. We try again. Did you look? Be nice. Try to be a little aggressive. And that's how we do. We send, we used to, in the older days, we used to send printed promo. COVID time, that things changed for us. And the printed promo are very selective now because, it's like so hard to keep up. Like who's working remotely, who's going to the office, who's not, who's Meredith Corporation or Condé Nast. Are there all the editor there? So instead of doing that, we're relying on email promo, personal promo, and sometimes we do a MailChimp order, up to the larger client list. But we always, for individual stuff, we always sort of take our time creating something, a promo, an e-promo, so to speak, and send it out and follow up till you get some feedback. And sometime, the truth is you don't, even though I've been around this business for a long time, I've known them personally. Some of them are like friends. They just don't reply, and it's not good, but you can't force them to answer you back. And oddly enough, a year later, somebody will say, "Hey, didn't you send me that promo about this person in Alabama?" And I said, "Oh, really? You looked at it? You never called me back." And then, some remember, some don't. And but that's how we do it. We take an approach of personally, working on sending direct email.
And that service
And we
is
don't rely on
so again.
that service provided by us, as you know, same for I mean, we mentioned, we're talking about assignment, which is not the business that was for me 15 years ago or even 5 years ago. It's like, you know, let's just turn this into an archive, right? Story. Somebody in Namibia or somebody in Iran send us a story and we love it and we want to pitch it. We do the same thing. We take our time, we put a set of images together, we create a banner, create a link, and we send it, we pitch it physically to the magazine. You came back from Gaza, or you're still in Gaza, you're producing images. Yeah, we don't rely on somebody who is registered into the archive to download the images. Somebody like Lori and Daniel take the set of images, put them together, and send them out to the client so they can see somebody from this 2-hour talk or reach out to me and I like the story that they're producing, no matter what it is. Could be a lifestyle story. It could be a social issue on, immigration, or famine, or something from Haiti, and we like it. We feel like we'll take our time to just put it out and send it out to the clients and send it out to the partners. And the partners we work with overseas have the same mentality of being proactive, of putting work together and sending them out to the clients, and not just hoping that one day, the stuff's gonna be licensed because it's in the archive. Older stuff stays in the archive. I get it, but sometimes older stuff becomes actual news. Let's say if we done a drug story, out of poor neighborhood in Kensington, Pennsylvania, and then it didn't sell, and then we find out, and that story was done 3 years ago. We find out in the news people are dying from overdose in the town, so we take that story out, we put it back out, we sort of refresh it and put it back out to let people know we have it. We never rely on just, if it's in there, it's gonna surface. We'll have to make thing surface when there's news related to it, and that's how the archive stays active and fresh and alive. Yeah, we have clients that are registered, that come in, do their research, they're doing travel story. If they need their help, we help them. If they're not, they're just downloading their own images and using stuff. But on actual sort of cycle of story that are news come up, we so active in sending these stories back out again.
I think that's like just as a reminder how incredibly important this idea of an infrastructure behind the photographer that the agency provides. It's really key because for the photographer to do this themselves is incredibly time consuming and often is almost impossible, I think, to do it on your own. Another thing which we neglected to mention, but actually is, I think, one of like the best parts about being with an agency is that the accounting is being done for you, right? You give your invoice, you give then you will either bill the client or follow up with the client. And most importantly is the follow-up, because as I think many of us know in this business, as you do as well, clients can take 3 months, 6 months to pay. And continually remembering, first of all, as an individual, to go and like, oh yeah, what happened to that job I did for so and so 6 months ago? People forget and they lose money because they don't follow up on stuff. The agency fights, for the money. They know who to talk to. Quite often, photographers send their invoice to the editor, who then on passes it to accounting, and then the accounting people screwed up, and then you have to be harassing the editor who barely doesn't want to talk to you anymore because they're so busy with everything else to find out what happened to your money. And this way, the agency is dealing directly with accounting. They know who to talk to, they know what to do, and they know when there are problems. There are also times when, using Newsweek as an example, where after Newsweek was sold for the third or fourth time, even though they were still giving assignments out and photographers were taking them, nobody was getting paid. And I think you don't work with Newsweek anymore, right? Because you don't trust.
No, sadly, that relationship went sour because we weren't getting paid, and we had to go after them and chase them and
So,
legally
right. So
to
here
collect the
is a great
money.
example of the agency is protecting the photographer from making a serious mistake, because often, obviously, as we all know, that we have to pay our expenses up front and then hope to get reimbursed. So photographers, including I think people at Seven, we lost serious money working with Newsweek or when during the different transitions of that magazine. And then Marcel was like, no, that's it. Don't Nobody works with Newsweek anymore until they change their ownership or whatever. So these little things are, and they're not so little, the infrastructure, the people behind pushing the stories, the accounting, the follow-up, the invoicing, um, becomes very valuable aspect of being with an agency, because as many of you who are, I think, on this call are freelancers and doing this on your own, you know how incredibly overwhelming this could be. If you're really good at it, it doesn't take you a lot of time, then maybe it's not worth the financial remuneration to the agency, and you can do better on your own. But I would say most photographers who are freelancers always can be helped by having a support system, whether it's, again, not just specifically Marcel and Redux, but
Oh,
other
yeah,
agencies as well. Yeah.
absolutely. There's a lot of, you mentioned agencies, SIPA still around, by the way.
Super America,
Um,
yeah, and Super Paris, right.
yeah, SIPA Paris. But there's a lot of reps, there's a lot of individual reps, and there's a lot of reps, agency reps that represent photographers that still active and act on the behalf of, as an agent on behalf of the photographer, especially when it comes to commercial work. So there is that. But also, I said that before. Right now, all of us, including the photographer on this call, we live in the golden ages. Everything is at your fingertips. So they don't have to use it. I know you've been advocating, which I appreciated, not just for people to come to us. They have a choice. If some photographer are great business people, you know, he or she can be like, oh, I know how to build this. I'm gonna go after it. I know what to invoice for that. And plus, there's a lot of tools. There's a lot of workshop. You have the foundry. There's a lot of portfolio reviews. There's so many things a photographer right now can do on their own, and it's okay. And just like you said, the infrastructure of an agency can help a photographer tremendously. Um, if they wanted it to go beyond chasing, $75 parking charge on their invoice, where they can be out shooting and thinking about other stuff to do. And obviously, an agency that house their files, or images, can get them out faster and license them for the right price. Because again, what I mentioned earlier, we are a right managed agency. We don't have any royalty free. We don't do subscription. Everything we do in the archive is a la carte, which means every picture's um, is licensed at a price. And again, maybe this is the group understand this. We work in an industry that's sort of they dictate the price for the assignment. And sadly, assignment, as we know, prices hasn't gone up in the last 20 years as much where inflation is today. And they dictate the space rate. And for us, we obviously we try to fight, and we accept. We have no choice in this because the industry is so dominant for what the day rate is, or what the space rate is. But when it comes to space rate, that's on special stories and special fees. If a photographer has an exclusive image, if a photographer has a special feature, we and one thing we do, which I don't know if other agencies do that, we sort of cater for the photographer. We give them a lot of integrity and we respect what they do. And if they tell us, look, I have shot this story and I want it only sold as a feature, which means I don't want one image here, one image there to be licensed, we respect that. We feel the story is strong enough. We're gonna only put it in the archive and only mention that's only can be sold as a special feature, which mean, we dictate the price of the feature, what it sell for. We don't want to sell it for what the magazine dictate is their space rate. If somebody have shot an important person, or we feel that we can mark up and say this is a special fee, we restrict the high-res download for our client. So we have the wiggle room to fight back a little bit on special images and try to restrict them and demand a higher price what the magazine dictate. And unfortunately on the assignment it's very tricky because there's a lot of photographer, because there's a lot of talent, because they're dominant, especially when it comes to the editorial market. The day rate is still way, way below what market value is for somebody's daily rate, in my opinion, anyway.
So Marcel, just before we get to the questions, I was just wondering if you could be a little bit futuristic on what you see in the future for our little world of photojournalism and the role of the agency and the photographer.
Ron, it's like I'm still in it and I'm gonna stay in it. I'm gonna keep putting up a good fight to believe in this industry and photography that we just talked about and mentioned. I'm still here, fight for the photographer, integrity of photography we put in, staying authentic to the images we have, no manipulation, tell a good story, help the photographer get them where they want to be as much as I can. The biggest hurdle is what I see and I don't like and I don't control is how poorly the media print industry and online publication is doing. And it worries me, but I still feel there's enough work that goes around. If you do good work, if you focus on yourself and your style, if you're passionate about your photography, there's still room for it. It may not be a big field of the room, but it's still ways for you to get yourself recognized and published and get work. Editorially, you said it that it's really tough for photographers to make a living today, and I agree with that. Unfortunately, you have to diversify a little bit. You have to try to shoot commercially if you can get that going for you. There's still I think still magazine will still be around. I'm not sure how in the print world from a year from now, 2 years from now, it's going to be. I do hope the online print pick up more speed. I'm disappointed it doesn't. You don't see a lot of online publication picking up speed, and I don't know why. I think the lack of advertising probably is not helping them. So they have to do something. They have to stay fresh, try to reinvent themselves in a way. But I really, just to remain positive and I believe that. I'm just not trying to fake positive. I think there's still a world of photography where you and I and the people on this call will exist. We have to do good work. We have to produce. We have to be able to have in our hands good work to put out there. And I strong believer. I don't believe in our world, in my world, I don't believe in artificial intelligence. It's going to replace the work I do, the photographer I work with. And I'm going to fight for that till I'm long gone. I feel like that's not in my world. It never will be in my world. I would never have any artificial intelligence in the archive. That's not what we do. We represent photographer, you want to call them artists. And we're going to continue doing that as long as we can, support ourselves and keep, paying the good people that's on our team to run this business and help me run this business. We're going to keep going it. So we can't, I don't know. And I'm being optimistic that we're going to be able to do that. I've been blessed with working with great photographer like you, Ron. I mean it from the bottom of my heart, and other photographers who've been sort of very loyal and understanding the process and the way we do business. And I've been lucky to work with great partners, really good independent agency that been around fighting exactly what we're fighting for. And that helped us tremendously because they expand the archive and expand the need for us to exist and have client come to us, because we have a lot of great material that has value, and hopefully that value will continue to grow.
That's great. Thank you, Marcel. I greatly appreciate that. I'm going to hand it over to Nika now to go to the Q&A.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Marcel, for this.
Yeah, Nika, thank you.
Yeah. So we have quite a lot of questions in the Q&A. So I'll try to group a few because they might be similar, or at least those that are from the same community member. So first we have Daniel asking, how can a photographer collaborate with Redux Agency? And then we had another question that came through Discord that was actually if a photographer is also close to you geographically, can have a meeting with you. So this is really two questions, but it's a similar.
Yeah, I can answer them both at the same time, no problem. So we have a submission at reduxpictures.com. So any photographer who's here listening now can send a submission to us. They can send since I'm here, they can send it directly to me. But the process is it goes to submission or it goes to me, and we take a look at it, and either we're interested and we do get back to them. Sometimes in submission, I have to say we may not be as diligent as getting back to everybody, but we usually get back to everybody. But certainly they can email me and we can get back to them, say, look, we can help you, or no, we can't. And the reason why, let me explain. So people say, oh, so the story has to make sense for us. We have to feel that the images have a marketing ability that we can place them. As much as I said, I love photographer, I love to help photographers. At the end of the day, I want everybody to understand it's just a business as well for us as well as it is for them. We can't take images that sort of, and we have done that in the past because we like them, but then we end up putting so much time and effort into it and they don't sell. And the photographer gets frustrated and get disappointed, and we don't want to disappoint anybody. And for some reason, they have them and they sell them. They can sell, somebody wanted them, and they probably feel, hey, we failed them, but I sold it directly. That happens sometimes. But the answer to the quick question is they can send it to submission. They can send it to me, and we'll give them an honest feedback. We would like the story. We like the way they're shooting. We see potential, we're gonna make them return on their investment and ours. And then we'll put the story with our files. As I mentioned, to talk to Ron, there's a lot of moving part getting the story into the file. It takes time and effort. Not because something is shot digitally, it's easy for us. So we have to make sure we can do that. Second, we're working remotely now, but I do come to the city once a week. If I'm available once a week and we can meet with photographer, either we can do it via Zoom or video or Google Meet, which I do that all the time, all week long. Or if I'm in a city and I'm happy to meet somebody in person for a coffee, or we usually rent an office for the day, so it can work that way as well.
Yeah, great. I think maybe there will be a person reaching out, so just we said we'll check.
Yeah, of course. No problem.
Okay, then we have two questions from Masi. She's the first thanking you for the information, and then asking if Redux helps freelance photographers in editing the pictures for the photo essay. Should it be done by the photographer? And then the second question was also if the photo agency helps with publishing a photo book or an exhibition, let's say.
So I'll answer the question, the latter. We don't help with photo books. We don't help with exhibition. You know, we can help them, refer them with, if we know of places we think is worthwhile, we can give them that information to do that. As third, was the first questions, do we help photographer edit a photo story? We do, if we take the story on, if we feel the story is strong enough, we're happy to do that. Then we sit down, work with them, you know, give them advice, sequence the images, work on the caption with them. We do that. Randomly, just to help, you know, that's really, to be honest, we used to be able to do that, but now the time and energy, we just don't.
Yeah, but it makes sense. If you already have a guarantee it will be published, then you do it.
If we think, yeah, we never have a guarantee, but if we think, yes.
Yeah. Okay, then we have an anonymous comment, also a question that there's many times that people will work the whole day and then at the end you don't get paid for the work, and this person is saying that this happens regularly. So how should they react in such circumstances, because you're losing so much effort and time in your day? So what to do when you work but your work is not published and you're not paid back for your like investment?
I have to think, like, are you working all day because you wanted to, or because somebody asked you to work all day
The
and didn't
question's
pay
a bit
you?
confusing. It doesn't say, like, is the person talking about being on assignment with an agreed payment and then they just don't get paid and get ripped off, or they're doing something on spec and they can't sell it? That needs to be more clarified. It's a little bit harder.
Wait with this one. Then we have a question from Anastas. He's asking if from an agency perspective, there's a difference to work with news editorial photographers and long-term personal projects photographers, if there's such a separation, because I know nowadays a lot of photographers do obviously all these things.
I mean, yeah, you know, there's the long-term photographer might require you know, a story or two that they produce a month, a week, I'm not sure, and we just gotta sit down and look at the stuff. The daily stuff, you know, once we take on, I'm hoping I'm answering the question the correct way. The news editorial photographer, you're filing in every day. You're filing in when story happened or after it happens, right? And the stuff is getting you know, stuff is being put in the archive almost immediately and been pushed out immediately to the online magazine or print magazines or trade magazine or whatever. And the longer term story is, which I mentioned, that, you know, it takes delicate procedure in editing the work, put it online and push it individually to one magazine to the others here and abroad. So it's just a different filing system and different procedure. But a photographer can do both. Some photographer can work on long-term story, and they can do, you know, editorial news daily coverage if they like to. It doesn't really bother us.
But
And again, I hope I answered the question.
yeah, in terms of your perspective on this, like if there's a photographer doing just long term and if there's a photographer doing just editorial, there's no separation, because this Anastasia is asking for that. You approach each like
No,
same exact way, right?
Yeah, we approach them same exact way. Like I said, the editorial, the daily stuff, we're moving, we're more reactive, and long-term stuff, we're taking our time, working with a photographer, looking at the work, and getting the work ready to go out when it comes in.
All right. Then we have Justin asking, it's a little bit longer question, so I'll read everything and hopefully we'll get the core. So Justin is saying that we often work with agencies that distribute their work without telling them in advance, and this often creates problems for them in countries where they work, while the management is often far away and they end up not getting any protection, even though it's the agency that puts you in difficulty. In the
Hey,
end,
Marcel. Sorry, go ahead, Nika.
Yes.
Just to tell Marcel that Justin works in the Congo.
yeah,
So go ahead.
yeah. So in the end,
Okay.
they become blacklisted, particularly with institutions, but at the same time, they become a target to cover certain events, and the agency remains silent about the situation. So how should they behave or approach these situations?
Well, to me, it has to be a clear understanding where the work can go to or cannot go to from the beginning. So Justin should, or the group of photographers he worked with, if they're putting work out, that should be clear that where the work can go to or cannot go to. Like for instance, when we sign on a photographer for syndication, we ask them before, look, we're gonna send the work out to 13 of our partners, or we're gonna syndicate the work out overseas, and we're gonna license the work here. And if the photographer, then they should be able to tell, look, you cannot give the work out to this NGO, you cannot give the work. So like I say, we accommodate the request of restriction to photographers. So I don't know who Justin's working with, but they should definitely spell things out before he gives the work out to be distributed to the agency they're working with. If that makes sense, I hope it does. Yeah, it has to be clear understanding where the work can go and where the work cannot go.
But that's usually done through contracts and through this, and I think.
Oh, it's a premeditated, agreement. Please don't send my work to these different NGO. Please don't send my work to whatever. Spell it out.
Yeah.
So there's no misunderstanding.
Right. Yeah, as clearly as possible. So I think it's really, as you say, it's really setting the terms in the beginning, and then it will be more clear to everyone.
Yeah, because like I said, it's once the work goes inside a bigger organization, there's no control of it because it's just sending it out, distributing everywhere, So just tell them where you don't want them. You don't want the work to be distributed. So you're not surprised and be disappointed at the end.
Okay. Then, yeah, I hope this was good, Justin, for you. Then we have Zoba Yerioti asking if there's any advice for upcoming photojournalists, especially those from the majority world who aspire to be a rooster, contributor, or staff of any international photo agency. As you have mentioned, the geographical place is important for a photographer.
Okay, let me see. Any advice that comes from this? I mean, I mean, let's. It's so hard to define third world countries these days, but I understand. I think they have to work on stories either in their own countries, or they have to work, if they have the ability and want to travel, to work on story that interests them in other countries, and provide um, provide sort of important issue that they like to cover. I think geographically, like I said, we randomly have photographer in geographic places, and I mentioned we don't have anybody in Shanghai, and Shanghai is an important place. So is Beijing, so is Hong Kong. And yeah, we have somebody in Nairobi, we don't get a lot of requests for. So geographically, I want to emphasize that to be recognized, you got to work on stories, obviously, in your own country that has meaningful and long-term, interest. Either I'm not sure where Zubair is from, but let's say you work on production, industry, business stories. Not doesn't have to be just famine and poverty. You work on story of maybe fishing that makes sense. What's the economy's like? Or you realize, and people ask me, what do you think? I live in Egypt, I live in Cairo, I'm not getting enough work. What do you think I should move to? I want to stay in the Middle East. I want to stay in, I want to stay in the other part of the world. I say, maybe go to New Delhi, maybe go to Bombay because there's more work there. If you really want, that's the kind of, we don't have a lot of assignment for us, but that's our clientele. And I want to emphasize that every clientele is different. If you want to work for NGO, which we don't do a lot of NGO work, we do some. Maybe if you're based in Haiti right now, you're gonna have plenty of work, right? Or maybe if you're based in the Congo, you're gonna have tons of work from NGO because there's so many things happening daily. All depends where you wanna the work you want to produce and what you want to chase. For us, we can keep somebody busy if they live, in New Delhi more so than if somebody lived in Cairo, because New Delhi has economical story that might interest the magazine we work with. We can do a business assignment. We might do a travel story. We might do a portrait of a businessman. So I hope I answer your question.
Yeah. And then I'll go to, because you were talking about the importance of local stories as well. So we have Alexander, he's from our mentor program, asking for those who work in Ukraine, does Redux help the photographers you work with to get accreditation from the armed forces of Ukraine?
So the short answer is yes. The more complicated answer is, okay, we want to help photographer, and I always do, and some people maybe we want to make sure that, especially in war zone area, we want to make sure they stay safe. We just don't want to give them a letter to go to the front. We don't want to hear somebody getting hurt, injured, God forbid, getting killed. We want to make sure there is the work is good. The work has value, and we want to make sure the story they're doing has meaning. But mostly we want to make sure we're not putting their life in danger. But yes, we do give accreditation to photographer, especially photographer who we believe are going to produce an amazing, even if they go and then the things didn't work out, it's fine. But it's somebody we really feel they're going to do great work.
Okay. I hope, Alexander, this answered the question, but if you feel you need more information, just get in touch with us. Then we have a question from Joseph. He's asking, how can you get the most out of a portfolio review? And then where you can find them outside the major ones in New York. So I think community can also serve as a source for that, as we do publish this on Discord. But maybe, Marcel, from your side, in which you participated in.
Yeah, I think they should. Well, obviously, Visa for l'Image, what Jean-Francois Leroy did in Perpignan, it's been tremendous eye opener and help for a lot of international photographer, people from third world countries, people from Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, US even helped them tremendously by having this gathering. So you should look for that and still go to that. Obviously, the portfolio reviews might have shrunk a little bit than they used to be. But also, beside New York, you should follow there's a New York Times that offer these reviews, and I think you have to submit to them. Yes, it is in New York, by the way. That does not answer the question. But also, you should follow NYC PhotoWorks. NYC PhotoWorks. I don't know. They offer review in LA, Chicago. I don't know a lot of international photo reviews that happen, but there is one in Athens. You so I think if you Google photo reviews worldwide, they pop up. But I think they're limited, to be honest with you. And unfortunately, I wish I could tell you what else you can go to.
Just add to that, Marcel. The New York Times this year is online as well. There's an online version of the New York Times review. The festivals are really helpful. Perpignan is one. Arles, the Rencontre Festival, which is before Perpignan in July, also has portfolio reviews. So those are two that are in France. And if you look at different photo festivals, often they'll have portfolio reviews attached to them as well. If you become a student at Foundry, we do portfolio reviews. Marcel is one of the reviewers as well. So stay tuned for the next announcement on Foundry. So there are places to do so. And the benefit of the portfolio review is that it's always going to be, even the ones that charge, it's going to be more economical in that you're able to see 6 to 8 editors that would take you 2 weeks to see in normally that you get to see in half a day. So as Nika said, we're listing other portfolio reviews in community, so you should pay attention to those. And then it might be when the ones that are not online anymore or not online at all, it's up to you if you want to invest in them. But the ones that are online, you obviously should take advantage of no matter what.
But yeah, I would also say that in partnership with PhotoWings, obviously this program is tuition free, but we want to do portfolio reviews second half of the year because, as you know, Ron, they were in program last year. We decided to give priority to the one-to-one program, but we will announce also portfolio reviews later in the year. So I think at least around 20 of our community members, if not more, will get a chance to attend. Obviously, it will be upon application. So selection will apply, but yeah, we will have that online because I am aware also that a lot of festivals do this now only in person, because yeah, people like festivals returned a bit to normal and they don't tend to do stuff online anymore. But we'll be sharing more also in Discord, so just keep an eye. And if you're interested in a specific region, just tell us and then we can do a bit more research. Then Marcel Joseph also asked if he can also work with an agency, for example, without necessarily being in the Rooster.
Yeah, I mentioned and for Joseph that Joseph should know that the roster is like purely for assignments, but also like we work with thousands of photographers. I don't mean like millions, but we work for outside photographer who pitch story to us on the archive side of Redux. That you can see we have so many photographers that we take stories and that we try to push these stories out to them. So yes, you don't have to be on the roster.
All right. Then we have Anastas having another question, which is about the video. So do you also send photographers on assignments making video? Is it required by your clients?
We still we don't do videos. It's rarely we get asked to do videos. Not that we don't, but it's rare. So we don't have a video per se department, or we don't put video in our archive.
Okay. Then we had Masi with another question as well, asking if it's ethical to work for more than one agency as a freelance photographer. What's your thought on that?
The short answer is yeah, absolutely. We have photographer that shoots events for Getty, and then work for us on assignment. We have some exclusive assignment contract with photographer where they cannot shoot for another rep or agency. But usually on the editorial side, we're flexible. Sorry.
Yeah. So then we have the question from Francisco that's connected to you explaining that they can apply on your website. So he has a question if in order to apply again, if you give feedback in case the person is rejected. I know you said you don't reply necessarily to everyone, but in case you would be asked for a feedback, would you provide it to the photographer that applied?
I don't know if you can hear the background noise.
Not so much. It's okay. It's still okay. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the not so great answer. So no, most of the time we don't give feedback. And just so the bigger answer is we get so many submission requests on a day-to-day basis, right? And sometimes the reason is we just can't handle the work, even though the work is good, or we feel like the work may not be able to do well in the archive. Will take us time and energy to put it in, and for us to get back the return on our investment may not be feasible. So usually, unfortunately, the short answer is no. Fortunately, we can't help you right now. Sorry, but doesn't mean he or she can't try again.
Mhm.
So we don't give that big, long-winded explanation, unfortunately, and I'm sorry for that. If they want something, they can always. I'm reachable. I'm not untouched. They can reach me directly, and I can tell them, look, I'm going to tell them the same. I like the story, but I don't think we can, really do much with it right now, or it's too much for us. So that's usually become a short answer. And if they want a longer one, they can try and email and try to get a better explanation.
So there was also a question if I can share your email. So is it, or maybe if you want to share it.
It's online. It's online. They can find it themselves. Just go to reduxpicture.com. Just contact. You can find all of us. Absolutely. Don't make it easy for them. Let them find it.
Yeah, that's a good advice. Then let's go to copyright questions. So there's two. First from Amy, she's asking that she's reflecting actually, saying that she's afraid to post her images on Instagram and on other social media. So what do you advise to the photographers you work with to do, like in when they publish on social media?
We tell them to post them. We're not afraid, and I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to tell Amy why we're not afraid, because with the technology today, we have a third-party infringer that chase for us on our behalf, and on behalf of the photographer we work with, and we have the work in archive. Anybody, when I say anybody, we don't care about a student, downloading images. We're not going to chase every person, but we chase big organization, and small companies, PR firms, stupidly, they're not understanding the copyright, that download images from a social media account, our social media account, or a social media account for a photographer that work with us. We chase them legally and go after them, sadly, and enforce them to pay us back. But she shouldn't be afraid.
Okay.
Even if she doesn't have a third party infringer. That it's just common right now that to be recognized, I feel you should post your images on social media. Maybe not everything, keep thing, just but something to generate an appetite of who you are and what you do, you should definitely do that.
And then we had an anonymous attendee asking that it seems that wire services will insist on having the copyright. However, I encountered publications who suggest shared copyright. This seems odd. From your experience, what is the prevailing norm right now?
All the above. Just so yeah. So wire agencies, unfortunately, and a lot of newspapers own the copyright of the photographers. And what the New York Times did about 10, 15 years ago, they offered to co-share the copyright. Where the photographers keep the rights and the Times keep the right for the images. And that's sort of unusual, but it's sort of little by little other companies are trying to do the same, give co-shared right to the photographer. So, but the wires, usually it's always all or nothing.
Yeah, so Alejandra was asking like how to make this first approach with an international agency to sell a story of a city that maybe doesn't seem important, but it has a topic that's very international or very like common. So what would you suggest? Just submitting through websites as you have, or trying a different approach?
I would just like for us, you can submit. They can submit to us. Now they can find my email. They can submit to me directly, and I can tell them if the story worth a while for us to take them to take it on. But there's, like Ron mentioned, there's other agency beside us that exists overseas. There's one in there's like in Turkey. There's agencies. There's agencies in Spain. There's Contacto. There's Italy. There's other agencies that might be in approximate places to the photographer. They don't have to come all the way to the US for us to represent the work. They can send the work to Panos, to Life in Germany, to VISM in Germany, to VU, to Hans Lucas in France, to Rhea in France. There's so many independent agencies still hungry to look at work. So if somebody turns you down here, if we turn you down here, doesn't mean that somebody else can't look at the work. So just please don't be discouraged. Whoever turns you down, keep trying, sending the work to other places. Yeah. And I don't know if Ron, you guys list those independent agency, but they're easily findable and they can be listed. There's other people beside, a lot of people beside us that can look at work.
No, that's definitely what we plan to do. We have a list of festivals and grants in preparation. It's always an endless list of festivals because there's always new ones popping up, and also with grants.
That's true.
Yeah, but then with agencies, we didn't do that yet. And then I think it's a very good advice to do it. And we'll organize that regionally. And I think then it's going to be good for everyone. Also, thank you, for this advice.
No problem.
Yeah. And then just another question from Masi is the audience of the magazines you work with, or are they more like English speaking world? Are they published mainly in Western countries? Who do you work with the most?
Well, I mean, we're based in the US, right? So we work mostly with the US magazines here. But for Masi to understand, we also, well, I just because of my longevity in this business, I know a lot of people outside the US, but I rely on the partners I work with in France. For example, Rhea is our agent in France, and they work with their market in France. They license and sell the images to Paris Match, VSD, I mean, all the French publication, Le Point, Le Monde. We work with Life in Germany, and they license the work we produce and that we take from our photographer and they license the work for Stern, Spiegel, Focus, and all the German publications. Same with the Italian agent we have, Contrasto, they license the work for the Italian market. So I hope that answered the questions.
Yeah, I think it does. But yeah, I think this was, then there was a question on what kind of stories are the most interesting. So I don't know if you can answer that, but maybe.
Oh, that's like having a crystal ball, you know? It's like it's obviously current news event are interesting. You know, if somebody has something different from the Ukraine that comes out, that's not just a war. If somebody is inside Russia that can produce a story on, you know, the economy of Russia, the wealth of Russia, if somebody, and you know, they don't have to be in the hot zone to produce a story. It could be, like I mentioned, the social issue is really big for us, and sometimes to our fault, we take too many stories, unfortunately, that we like, but we can't, for some reason, we can't license because the timing may be. So social issue, immigration, famine, you know, pregnancy in the third world countries, um, you know, rich people, poverty, youth, you know, doesn't have to be all negative stuff. It could be, you know, lifestyle of young teenager in Tehran, you know, could be somebody, what's going on in Congo besides just war and jungle, you know, it could, so it's just, you know, a story that has sort of long-term meaning and story that's going to come up. Like for us here in the state, gun violence is always an issue, mental illness is an issue, immigration on the border is always an issue, climate change around the world is an issue. So all these social issues that sort of come, you know, and goes, but then come back again and stay relevant.
Yeah. And then we had a question from, let me just see. Yeah, maybe go to Lucian, and I would say this is our last question because we have around 5 minutes left. So she's asking, what advice do you have to early career photographers, given how difficult it is to get assignments and that assignments pay so low nowadays?
Well, my advice is to you know, if you really love this business, is first and foremost, don't give up on it. Stay passionate about it. But honestly, I just gonna, you know, I see photographer that are my friends and people I represent, and I see the struggle they go through, and it's very painful. I would say honestly, diversify if you can. Some people are, if they want to stay in photography, they shoot wedding. There's nothing to be ashamed about. They shoot family portrait, kids, mom and dad. They shoot engagement, you know, do dinner rehearsal. Try to, if you want to stay in photography, try to diversify as much as you can, to follow your passion and dream. It is flat out tougher than it ever been in this business, and I wish I can not say that, but it's the fact. It is harder than it was before, and you know, I have photographer that working for Uber to subsidize their photography business. You know, I have a photographer. She's you know, worked at a bar as a bartender, to be able to continue photography. Do what you can, you know, to be able to sustain yourself, no matter where you live, if you want to follow photography. And yes, the assignment are very far in between from what they used to be. So do any work, you know, to follow your passion. Don't be ashamed. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's I think we have this perception of even photographers that we consider very successful have it easy, but I think many times Ron and everyone said it's they still do other projects. And I worked with photographers that won World Press, obviously, but they had to do work for, I don't know, tourism organizations, weddings, as you say, and then you do that passion projects that you really that drive you, and then it's all make sense. I think, Ron, I don't know your thoughts on this as well.
No, it's, I mean, Marcel said it, I said it earlier, the earlier that you can diversify your income stream, preferably from photography, the better it's going to be, because unless you're staff, or you're in your 20s and you have very little expenses and you have a good relationship with a newspaper like the Times or the Journal, or somebody's hiring, a lot of freelancers, it's difficult just to survive on editorial. So the sooner the better that you start to look at all the different, making sure you have your archive is taken care of, making sure that you have good relationship for assignments, NGO work, possibly advertising work, wedding photography for some people if they want to do that, print sales, book sales, teaching, lectures, all sorts of different things can come at different points of your career, and will add to it. But editorial, if that's your passion, can be your base, but it gets supported by all these other elements.
Yeah, I think we'll close with this, Ron and Marcel. Thank you so much. I'll just
thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, just I just wanted to say that this month really was for VII community dedicated more to business development, let's say, to cooperation. So I just want to remind the community members that are here that next week we have a budgeting workshop, which I think will be really an add-on on this lecture. Because yeah, it's in terms of negotiations, budgeting, it's very useful. So I'll just add that the next Wednesday we have this lecture. But again, thank you to both of you. I think was a very fruitful conversation. I think we learned a lot, and I think, Marcel, you can expect quite a few submissions to Redux now.
No problem. I'll promise I'll answer them back. Nika, thanks for having me. Ron, as always, I really appreciate it. Especially for the warm welcome you gave me, and obviously for being here, and I hope I can help out anybody who reach out.
Thanks, Marcel. Thank you for your time. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, you guys. Take care. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.